Well, hey everybody, John Rethlin here, and this is another retro review for a WCW pay-per-view, Spring Stampede 1994. And much like Spring Stampede 1999, which I did a retro review for, link up here if you have not seen that yet, I really enjoyed this one. And I'm doing a lot of WCW, NWA, TNA, now Impact Wrestling, and WWE. I'm doing a lot of retro reviews for, occasional shows of theirs. I'll have Raw Nitro comparisons of particular episodes throughout the year. And the reason I'm doing this, the current WWE product kind of has me burned out a little bit. I'm not saying that it's all bad. I'm not going to get into a rant about that, but I wanted to reflect back on some times that I did enjoy wrestling, really enjoyed wrestling, like see if shows hold up from when I was younger. And let's be honest, some of these don't hold up all that well. Some of these do hold up that well. But this one I actually enjoyed just a little bit more in Spring Stampede 1999 because there were a couple matches that were like about. This one, no match really bored me, even though there were a couple that were hit and miss. This might be one of the best pay-per-views of, like, at least the first 5 years of the 90s, from 90 to 1995. At least my personal opinion. WCW delivered a lot of really good pay-per-views. Problem is they couldn't really get a ton of traction until, Hall and Nash came in, even though Hogan, Savage, and others were helping. So this is before that, though. Now, they were hyping up the fact that Hogan was going to be coming into the company, so that was, like, right around this time. So it was still in a little bit of a weird flux because it was a few months away from Bash at the Beach 94 happening. And I will do a retro review of that. For this, video packages hyping up the main title matches, and you would get recaps before every single match. It's like, oh, what happened? Why are these people feuding? And then you would find out. Aaron Neville singing the national anthem. Aaron Neville apparently lived in the gym in the early 90s because he looks like he could have lifted the entire nation by by just his arms. Seriously, that guy was freaking jacked. What in the world? Hell of a singing voice, too. I just found that kind of funny. But then Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan on commentary, they would cut occasionally to Mean Gene Okerlund and Jesse Ventura. Jesse with about, that much hair and a ponytail on the back of his head. It was bizarre. And I believe this is Jesse Ventura's last pay-per-view appearance because he might have appeared at Slamboree 1994. But I know right after that he was gone. So we start off with Johnny B. Bad versus DDP, and of all the matches that they had, and they had some pretty good matches, especially over the TV title in, I want to say it was 94, but I think it was actually more like 95. They always had good matches. This, probably the weakest one, because DDP had just gotten back into really being like, a full-time wrestler on national TV. He had done the independents and stuff like that after leaving WCW during the Bill Watts era. And it worked really goddamn hard getting back into it. I don't think he was gone for too long, but the whole point is, this is probably the weakest match they had. It was still good for what it was. I mean, DDP did target Johnny B. Bad's ribs, hitting a really nice rib buster. But in the end, Johnny B. Bad got a sunset flip off the ropes. 1, 2, 3. Not bad, not great, but by no means a terrible start. I mean, Johnny B. Bad getting a pretty damn big reaction, and DDP would go on to do bigger and better things, while they would have Johnny B. Bad, in WWE, become the guy that carried Sable's bags. Good job there. We then have Gene Okerlund and Jesse Ventura basically killing time. They killed time occasionally. And then you would have Okerlund or Ventura do interviews backstage, but mostly it'd be Ventura. And then you start with the first title match. Well, the first of 4, rather, that is. Brian Pillman versus Lord Steven Regal for the TV title. Very good. I can understand why some people might not like it because it was very slow, and as far as a lot of not rest holds necessarily, but a lot of submission skills, given what Regal's style was. Pillman did start off hot, hit some really good moves. Regal would ground him eventually with some good stretches and everything. I enjoyed it, but I could see why some people may not like it nearly as much. Pillman comes back, they go over the top rope together, but then they can't get back in the ring in time, like before the TV time expires, even though usually sometimes the TV title matches could go a little bit longer on pay-per-views. This one only went 15 minutes. Time limit draw, so Pillman could not beat Regal. It was a good match. The finish was a little bit, they could have probably gone back into the ring with about 20 seconds and had Pillman almost beat Regal, but it was what it was. Despite the finish being a little bit weird, it was still fine. And then we get Colonel Rob Parker and Bunkhouse Bunk backstage. Bunkhouse Buck, that is. I didn't really care for Bunkhouse Buck, even though he wasn't that bad. Colonel Rob Parker was pretty entertaining as far as like being able to get being able to get a lot of heat and everything. But then you have the Nasty Boys versus Cactus Jack and Max Payne, Chicago Street Fight for the WCW Tag Titles. This was featured, I believe, on Foley's first 2-disc DVD set. It was shortly after his, wasn't shortly after his retirement. I think it was right before his comeback in 2004. But it was a pretty good match. You had, like, Nasty Boys were never necessarily great workers ever, but they could brawl. You did have a lot, and of course Max Payne would go on to be Man Mountain Rock. Yay. But what was nice about this is it was just a big old brawl. Weapons, shovel being used, a table botching, because the table broke and everything on this pile driver attempt near the end. You then had a brawl at the merch table or souvenir stand or whatever they called it. Not a great match by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fun. Foley then ends up taking this, Cactus Jack taking this horrible fall off the ramp because they had a big old ramp go right to the ring. Hitting his head on the concrete. I believe it was Sags hit him with the shovel and then covered him 1, 2, 3. So not great, but certainly not bad. And it was fun. The crowd was really goddamn electric for this. I'll say that much. And then we get Johnny B. Bad backstage with Jesse Ventura, and he says he's challenging whoever comes out as U.S. champion in the following match, Steve Austin or the Great Muta, because Johnny B. Bad feels that he can be U.S. champion. Okay. Nothing against Johnny B. Bad. It just the gimmick and the character was TV title ready, and that's about it. And that's nothing against the TV title. The guy was never going to be more than that U.S. champion. Sorry, I know Jim Duggan became U.S. champion later in the year, and Johnny B. Bad was better better of a worker than Jim Duggan, at least at that point. But Duggan was a much more over character. We then get the Great Muta versus Stunning Steve Austin for the U.S. title. There was a lot of great wrestling, some submission style, and I know that some people may have not liked that. This had a little less submission stuff than Regal and Pillman, but it was good. It did have slow building to it. Muta was not going to kill himself for the U.S. audiences as much as he was for the Japanese audiences, because he probably made way more money over in Japan, and B was just much more revered over there. Even though a lot of fans respect him. I mean, think about it. Like I'm like at G1 Supercard, he showed up at number 30 in the Honor Rumble, and the crowd went absolutely nuts. I went absolutely nuts because Muta and Jushin Thunder Liger were the two guys that got me into Japanese wrestling. So I was pretty thrilled to see this match. And Muta and Austin, look, I admit it wasn't perfect, and the ending was a bit of a cop-out. You did have, Muta hit the stun gun, and not like Tamatonga's stun gun, but when Austin would lift somebody up, and drop their throat and neck across the ropes, stun gun, that kind of stun gun. And then Muta looked like he was about to get the victory, but then he kicked Rob Parker and then accidentally sent Steve Austin over the top. Well, because WCW still had this whole stupid, over-the-top rope gets a DQ rule. And I always hated that. That's the one thing I hate about old school wrestling. And, I mean, I get it for back maybe in the 60s and maybe even in the 70s. But by the 80s, I mean, being traditionalist is fine, but it was just a cop-out to me. Even in Jim Crockett Promotions, even in the AWA, that kind of stuff. And I know they dealt with it much more as a sport. I never necessarily cared for that rule, but it was what it was. Muta got to... he lost by DQ. He got to have a good showing. Hitting a dive over the top on Parker and Austin. Yeah, maybe it was a bit of a cop-out. It didn't make Muta look weak. It just was kind of a weak finish, but still a good match. At least I thought so. And then you get Sting and Rick Rude for the WCW International Heavyweight Championship, and Harley Race basically grabs the mic from Rude and says, "I'm here on behalf of Vader, whether it's you, Rude, or you, Sting. Vader wants the winner." And then Harley goes to try to punch Sting, and Sting hits him, and Harley takes this freaking bump, the upside-down bump over the top rope and all that stuff. And this was a fun match. Rude and Sting always had good matches, even if they were short. Whether it was over the U.S. title, the TV title, U.S. title, whatever, or this title. Even though the international title was pretty ridiculous, because this is when WCW had split away from the NWA. It was a fun match. There were some lines from Bobby Heenan that were pretty funny, talking about where, like, I think like Rick Rude did a Rude Awakening or whatever, used a chain for the Rude Awakening, and Schiavone was talking to Heenan. Heenan says, "I wouldn't have done that." Schiavone says, "No," and he's like, "No, about 9 or or no, wait, it was a chain or something like it. It was, he did something with the Rude Awakening, and Bobby Heenan mentioned using a chain. Sorry, I screwed that up. And said, or maybe some piano wire. And Shivani says, "You're sick." He's like, "No, I feel great." And then talking about, like, when you got a guy in a chokehold, grab his windpipe and turn it. Boy, do they squeal. It's like, not for long, but they squeal. Says, oh, God, it's just, Bobby Heenan was just absolutely great during this. Because Bobby Heenan was just needling Tony, like, the whole goddamn night. It was so fucking great. But this was fun. It wasn't great. Roode did end up getting his tights pulled down at one point. That was something we definitely didn't need to see, but whatever. Heenan even said, "Wow, it's only 7:30, and you see that moon out there?" Fucking miss Bobby Heenan. I'm not saying he would have been doing commentary now, even if he was healthy and alive, but boy, good God, I miss Bobby Heenan on commentary. In the end, it looked like Roode was going to get the victory. Race ran back down. Vader ran back down. Sting's fighting him off. Roode clips Sting's knee. Goes for the Rude Awakening. Harley does his chair shot. It's one of the weakest goddamn chair shots you ever see. I mean, Roode, he didn't want to hurt Roode, but it was kind of weak. And then, Sting knocks Harley out of the ring. 1, 2, 3. Sting wins the WCW International Heavyweight Championship. And then, if I'm right, faces Flair very soon after. He faces him, I want to say, at the Clash of Champions in June. Yeah, he faces him at the Clash of Champions in June. And then Flair wins the title and then drops it to, to combine the titles, unification, and then drops it to Hogan to Bash at the Beach bit after. So that was a fun match. I mean, maybe not great. Maybe it was a bit sloppy to some people, but I liked it. And then Bunkhouse Buck versus Bunkhouse Buck. That's hard to say. Versus Dustin Rhodes in a bunkhouse match, which was not named after Bunkhouse Buck. Because Dusty's father, Dustin's father, Dusty, easy for me to say, had, come up with the bunkhouse, the bunkhouse concept and everything. And it's a big old cage where you got to beat people up, come dressed as you are, get them over the top of the cage and then to the floor. This is just a standard brawl with weapons and shit. That's all this really was. It was bloody. I mean, Buck bled at one point. Dustin really bled. He either bladed or got busted open the hard way. That was something. There was some nice belt shots. He was whipping Dustin with the belt. Dustin comes back. Parker got attacked. In the end, Parker did slip it was like a brass knuckle type thing or whatever, horseshoe type thing, and Buck hit Dustin. Even though it's no DQ, he still hid the foreign object. 1, 2, 3. Buck wins. So Rhodes loses a bunkhouse match for one of the first times ever, if not the first time ever. At least first time on, like, major TV. That was what it was. Vader and Roode confront each other. Roode's all pissed off because Vader and Harley Race interfere. They have a shoving match. Everybody's trying to separate each other. And, okay, unfortunately, Roode would be injured soon after this. I think he would be injured facing Sting in Japan, I want to say. Like, very late April or very early May. Which would unfortunately lead to the end of his in-ring career. I don't remember what happened, but I remember how severe the back injury was, or what type of back injury it was. I know it was severe enough to end his career. And then we get Vader versus the Boss. The Boss. He's the boss. Man, do you get it? It was the Big Boss Man. He was just called the Boss, which is gimmick infringement. Right there, and that's referenced here a little bit later. There's a brawl from the beginning. Vader goes into the crowd, goes into the front row. Vader does come back, even though Boss keeps kicking out. He ends up hitting a Vader bomb. Boss kicks out, but then Vader hits the moonsault. Pretty good moonsault, especially for a 450-pound guy. 1, 2, 3. And then they beat up Boss afterwards a bit. And then Boss gets a nightstick, starts beating up Harley Race. Nick Bockwinkel takes him backstage, says, "Hey, you can't do that. I got to take away your nightstick, your handcuffs, that kind of stuff." Basically saying, hey, we don't want to get sued by Vince, so you're going to have to be something else, essentially. That's what this was. And then we get Steamboat versus Flair for the WCW title. I'm going to make this one very brief. It's a fucking classic, lost classic. I wouldn't compare this to the Chicago Chi-Town Rumble match. I definitely wouldn't compare this to the 2 out of 3 Falls match I had at Clash of Champions 6. I would say this is comparable to the Wrestle War 89 match. Now, maybe the atmosphere at Wrestle War 89 was a little bit hotter, a lot hotter, but this was really good because Chicago appreciated Flair, they appreciated Steamboat, even though they booed Steamboat quite a bit. hard chops, good momentum switches, figure four, counters and stuff like that. Really good stuff. Looked like Steamboat might beat Flair with the figure four, then the figure four by Flair, but that didn't work. And then they did a double pin thing, kind of like how they ended the Clash of Champions 6, third fall, with kind of a pseudo double chicken wing like thing. But because both men's shoulders were pinned down, nobody was a winner. Excuse me. So basically, that's what ended up happening. Because it was a draw, the tie goes to the champion. So Flair retains. Nick Bockwinkel even says, the commentary afterwards, I have to talk to the WCW board and we'll see what happens. Flair ends up retaining the title, which is what should have happened. And we'll go on to have that big box office match with Hogan. But this was a pretty damn good match, and it did make Steamboat look weak, and Steamboat was understandably frustrated. And I would say it's a lost classic. I would call this comparable to maybe the weakest of their trilogy, and that's nothing against either of these guys, but it was a terrific goddamn match. And again, normally I don't like to rate. I don't normally like to rate, retro reviews and stuff like that, because I'm kind of grading on a curve. I'm kind of grading how it compares. But as far as something that I enjoyed, did I enjoy this as much as I have watching it a few years ago? Yeah, I did. And I'm going to say B. It was really fun. B plus, somewhere in between there. Really fun. But anyway, let me know in the comments if there's other stuff you want me to retro review. Bear in mind that if you guys have commented already and I've responded, then I already got that stuff written down. But if there's other stuff you can think of, especially if it's on the WWE Network, let me know. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I will see you soon.